introduce our speaker. Our speaker, Conrade C. Hinds, is a Columbus-based historian. He's a registered architect in Ohio and New York, and a retired project manager for the City of Columbus Division of Water. He has taught as an adjunct faculty member in the Engineering Technology Department at Columbus State Community College for 24 years. In 2013, his book Columbus and the Great Flood of 1913 was published. His new book, Lost Circuses of Ohio, touches on a subject that we know here in Massillon because we had 2 circuses that were based in Massillon. I bet you didn't know that. That was a long time ago. And of course, our museum is the home of our beloved Immel Circus, so we feel his topic is really pertinent here. He is married, his lovely wife is here, and they have 4 grown children and 4 grandchildren. And he is an auctioneer, and most important of all, he can yodel.
Thank you for that. Okay. Begin with, I love Ohio, and one of the things that I like writing about is the forgotten history of this great state. I've got a saying that America was not built by America. America was built by Ohio. Okay, that said, let's just start with the Civil War very quickly. After the Civil War, there was a lot of pain in America, North and South. My goodness, 600,000 people dead. And so with that, we needed something for at least once a day during the year in a community to put a smile on people's faces. So let's start with our Sells brothers. The Sells brothers were out of Columbus. We had Ephraim, Allen, Peter, and Lewis. There was a 5th brother who died at the Andersonville Confederate internment camp there during the Civil War. All brothers had been in the Civil War, but they were, in fact, auctioneers and wagon farmers. When they decided to put together a circus, they wanted to use a lot of what they learned in the Civil War so far as logistics, deployment, setting up for one day and then breaking down and moving 20 miles either north, south, or east. Here we see Peter, Ephraim, and Lewis. Allen, later on, he had decided to go to Kansas. So if you go to Kansas City, the Sells name is also a big name there also. The Sells brothers at one point teamed up with Adam Forepaugh. Forepaugh is a big name in the circus business of Ohio and also throughout the United States. And it was just circuses would often combine themselves just for the sake of logistics, railroad, and being able to play a larger territory. And with this, Forepaugh and Sells, they were able to give Barnum and Bailey a run for their money on the East Coast. This was their headquarters in Columbus. This was right across the Olentangy River from Ohio State University, where Ohio State is currently. And you can see it was no small affair. They were not a mom and pop shop. Full service. Take note that railroad and spur going straight through the property, given the land that they owned, slaughterhouses, carpentry shops, you name it. They wanted to be as independent as possible. They raised their own crops. On Sundays, it was the tradition, to take the family to the Sells brothers camp here to see the animals. That was a big thing. Of course, that was in the day when they didn't have zoos. Take note of this 10th city. That gives you an idea of the scope of what a circus was. The Ill exhibit upstairs, very comprehensive, and this is very similar. And again, a lot of this they learned during the Civil War in terms of how to break down a camp, set it up. Good gracious, feed 500 people, 3 meals a day. Speaking of feeding people, 300 people a day, this was just for 4th of July. The part I like to point out about this, particularly to my loving wife, take note how they have china and cloth napkins. I saw a finger go up over here, dear, and not paper plates. Now take note of the scope of this. Here's a hard bench, yes. That just gives you the scope of this. Generally it was, and I might say, it was a real 2x12. Okay? It looks like they're stretched fairly long, but it was a real 2-inch by 12-foot long board that you were sitting on. And this was the 3-ring circus, just massive. Okay. Annie Oakley, Ohio's own, Greenville, Ohio. Annie Oakley got her start with the Sales Brothers Circus. First contract signed right there in Columbus. Okay. She was with them for a season. Then she and her husband Butler, they then went on to the Buffalo Bill show. Okay. But so far as her start was right there with the Sales Brothers. Okay, let the community know that the circus is in town. This was the purpose of the calliope. I pronounced it calliope all my life. In writing the book, some of the folks in the circus business say it was calliope. Okay? Oh, yeah. But here you can see where it's screaming right there at the start of the circus parade, and you could hear it for miles. Specifically, the Sales Brothers Circus in Columbus, when they would start at the far end of High Street, when the state legislature was in session and heard the calliope, they adjourned and ran over to the windows. Okay, here's a poster once again. Just shows you the enormous size of this circus. Really, the Sales Brothers, they had 2 divisions of their circus. One worked the Midwest, South, and a little bit of the East Coast. They stayed out of a lot of the East Coast because that was the Barnum Bailey territory. But they also worked the West. I'm talking Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada. And if you had put those 2 shows together, it probably would have been the largest circus in the country at the time. Now, the horse. Everybody had horses in those days, but to go to the circus and see the amazing things that a horse would do, that is what was truly fabulous. But they put on all sorts of displays. In this case, they're talking about the original circus of 1,200 years ago in Rome. That's where they had the chariot races. The movie, Ben-Hur, that chariot race, that was a circus. Okay. And they would feature any number of different acts. In this case, you would have a ladies' chariot race. It was often proven the prowess of ladies in the circus and what they could do. Now, take note of the menagerie show. The circus started out as being a low form of entertainment. You didn't want to take your children there. It had games of chance, etc., etc. The menagerie was educational. Oh my. That brought animals from all over the world that you would, I mean, come on. Here in the flat plains of America, you would never see these, okay? So this was as much of a draw to the crowd to be able to see these animals. And bear in mind, they were in awe. This was like going to see a fabled dragon to see these animals. Okay. Again, stop and think of the 19th century mind, which is probably, oftentimes would not venture further than 10 to 20 miles at least from their home. Seals, hippopotamus. Take note here, the asp and the, help me out with the snake there.
Cobra.
The cobra. I have a fear of snakes, so I try to forget them. Okay. Now, the aerial acts were, in general, they were brought in from Europe. Okay? They were brought in from Europe. Nobody did aerial acts here, my goodness. No one had time to do aerial acts. They were too busy trying to, carve out a living. But they were extremely talented, and they were extremely, the awe that an audience would have. I mean, we're used to seeing them today, but the awe that an audience would have seeing people flying and catching these. I mean, they were on the edge of their seat because they just thought it was just, near death. Take note of the bar there in the lower right. Okay. I myself, in all my years of seeing the circus, I've never seen that particular instrument used, and I'm not quite sure how it worked. But that gives you somewhat of an idea. But stop and think of the balance that it would take. We have people at one end and people at the other. So given their weight, given the timing, given the balance, does anybody trust any other three people to... I wouldn't. Okay. And the grand parades and processions, they would put on extravagant shows and processions that would be reminiscent of ancient Rome, ancient Egypt. They would bring this whole idea of history right to people right there in their home. And they would set up the stage. They brought the props, everything with them. This is before Broadway. Okay. So if all of a sudden Broadway could be brought to Massillon, okay. And Massillon's a classic community that they would play. And then everybody probably within a 2-hour walk, 3 miles an hour, within a 6 to 10 mile radius of Massillon would then come to Massillon. Here we can see the whole idea of unloading. This is something that was developed here in Ohio. As a matter of fact, the first customized circus flat car was fabricated in Columbus. The idea of you put the brake on the flat car underneath, and you can just line your wagons up, and in those days they would hook them up to horses, and then just start down the line. And within, my goodness, like a third of the time, they would be loaded and ready. And this is what a lot of the circus business was about, is the logistics. How do you break down and then get to the next community 20 miles away and then set up, okay, for another 2 shows? It was amazing. And everybody Not, I'm talking about everybody was in sync. That was the whole idea. This, for the Sells brothers, they did an 1892 tour to Australia. Okay? So that tells you about, how successful they were here in America. In this tour, once they got to Australia, they ran into some serious bad luck. The local carnivals and shows did not want the Americans coming in and infringing. So to begin with, they had an inspector go upon the ship and declare that the horses had a case of glanders. Okay. And with that, they were sequestered. And by the time they could get new animals, given timing and the like, the entire show, it was not successful. In returning home, they were near broke. And that was when, once they got back to the States, that is when they found that they had to form a partnership with Adam Forepaugh to stay in the business. So they made a point of really billing themselves as just returned from Australia. Okay, they kept the sad news to themselves, but they came back as being triumphant. Let's see, Billy Carroll, forgotten today. He was a Maine. He was like Red Skelton of the day. All right, he was one of the main acts, him and his brothers. Here we have a Chinese troupe. This troupe played with the circus, their circus that was playing on the West Coast. However, in San Francisco, they were forbidden from performing. Why? Because they were Chinese. Okay. And the Chinese did a fine job of helping to build the Western Railroad. But in terms of being able to stay and establish a community, let's just say they ran into an awful lot of resistance. And so their culture and the like, they did not want to promote it there. But on to happier things. John Robinson, the John Robinson Circus of Cincinnati, okay, was also one of the largest circuses in America at the time. He primarily operated in the South, and he was one of the oldest circuses. They operated for 3-4 generations here in America. Also had a combined, take note there at the bottom, 3-ring circus, 3 combined menageries, also a Wild West and a hippodrome. That's a lot. Okay. These three generations of John Sr., John F., and also, was that Jim? Pardon me. They operated, let's see, into the early 1920s was when they stopped. Their headquarters was just outside in one of the suburbs of Cincinnati, over on the east side, and an awful lot of the talent that ended up in early silent pictures came from the John Robinson show. Here you can see they had any number of diverse acts. This was an advance car. If you had a circus, probably one of the most important aspects of the circus was the advance work. And they would go out anywhere from 3 weeks to a month ahead of time. These cars were specially equipped with not just admin, but they had printing presses. Reams of paper, large paper. In other words, they were printing their own posters. This was actual lithograph work. Okay. Here you can see one of the lithographs that they would put, and they would plaster. They had no real scruples about it. If it was a blank wall, they would just plaster the wall. Okay. Sometimes they would get permission, sometimes they wouldn't. And it was these people were at war with each other. The advanced men. John Robinson would come in and plaster the wall with their posters. Then the Sounds would plaster right over that poster. In no time at all, you probably had 10 layers of posters there. I mean, paper is an insulator, Okay. Now, they would also put on shows. Now, take note of this. This is the King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. This was one of the more ornate productions. As a matter of fact, this was done by Hollywood, the equivalent of Broadway producers, set men, and the like. And it was considered one of the most outstanding biblical narratives of the time. And everywhere it went, it played very well and drew extremely large crowds. This young lady played Sheba. Her actual name there was lost, but there she was. The grand circus wagons, in this case a cage. Take note of this cage. One of the things I like to mention is these cages were so ornate, they were a work of art in themselves. This is the exact same cage 50 years later. This is during the 1940s, about World War II. Okay. This was over in a sort of a circus graveyard over in Indiana. And it's a shame. Although, pleased to say, a lot of these have been restored. Okay, and they will be at the Circus Museum there in Baraboo and also in Sarasota, Florida. This is the Load Wagon Works in Cincinnati. A lot of these wagons, a lot of circus equipment was built in Ohio. Train cars were built in Dayton. The posters were printed in Cincinnati and Cleveland. As a matter of fact, that was such a going business that when Hollywood came in, then all of a sudden they started printing posters for the Hollywood movies. A lot of those companies, they were in business well into the 1960s. Okay. Now take note of this particular construction here. This was the cab. This was artisans. They're working on some of the ornate work in the boat factory. Now, put the cab the ornate work, put that on a Kelly Springfield engine, also built in Springfield, Ohio, and that's what you get. Okay. And believe it or not, this company is still in business today. They produce other industrial equipment having nothing to do with the circus. But these were very, very, very valuable at the time. I wanted to also point out the whole idea of the unloading. This is a Robinson Circus train being unloaded. There are camels and there are dromedaries. Does anybody know the difference? Was that right? Right. Well, the difference in one or two humps, right? Okay, depending on my state of mind, I know which one has one and one has two. Okay. Here we have Dan Curley, animal trainer. It's interesting, now Ringling, 2 years ago, they went out of business after 2 previous years getting a lot of serious flack about their treatment of animals. But I think it, to be fair, this man, Carl Hagenbeck, had the Hagenbeck-Wallace Circus. He was German. His American office was at the Cincinnati Museum, pardon me, Cincinnati Zoo. Okay. It was Hagenbeck who initiated much better treatment of animals in captivity. It was Hagenbeck who initiated this whole idea of get the animal out of the cage. Build an environment as close to their natural environment as possible. And it was also Hagenbeck who made a point of emphasizing the intelligence of animals. Oftentimes, you would find when somebody, for instance, a lion tamer, or let's say, was mauled by a lion, it was somebody who took an opportunity to get higher pay. Prior to that, they had just probably shoveled manure. And so they said, if you want the job, you've got it. And so they walked in there, and all of a sudden they started treating the animal as if it was dirt. And then the animal would say, okay, it's my turn. Charles Rush of Cleveland. Before Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, we had electric lights. Yes, it was the arc light. And the first use of lighting in a circus, and you note the scope and size of the circus tent, okay? So in order to light that up, Edison's regular light bulbs would not have worked. They used arc lighting. And this is sort of an example. The sun eclipsing, okay? And they were able to, at night, hold shows at night, especially as their season would go to toward the end of October. And so in order to put on an evening show, they would need these lights. Okay. We also have the Walter Main Circus out of Geneva, Ohio. Walter Main, take note here, he has gray hair. This is Walter Main. He was in his 20s. He inherited a circus from a small circus from his dad, and very quickly built it to be a sizable scope. And you can see the scope of his show. This would be a typical midway. It was an actual picture of a Walter Main midway. And again, the circuses were made of generally the midway, the regular circus performers and acts, and also the menageries. This is like, probably circa the 1880s going into the 1890s. Now, this is where the Walter Main Circus, Tyrone, Pennsylvania, 1893. In the movie, The Greatest Show on Earth, this is where they had the train wreck. Well, this is what they were taking it off from the Walter Main train accidents, although it was rather frequent in the circus business at this time. You see this curve right here? This, right, going uphill, they were coming down a hill, down a grade, okay? Or it might have been the other way. But they were coming down a grade and then hitting that curve. And they had no brakes, okay? People don't realize that in railroading in the 1880s, 1890s, early 1900s, there were as many deaths as there were caused by auto accidents in the 1950s. Okay. And a lot of it had to do with brakes. Okay. And surprisingly, within 2 days, they were able to collect themselves, get back on their feet, and were able to hold a show. Now, I wanted to point this particular circus out to you, the Mills Brothers Circus. It's also an Ohio circus. They were an innovator in that they had the idea is that they would partner with the Shriners, okay, or any number of other circuses. They provided the circus, but the Shriners, JCs and the like, they would do the promotion of the show. In other words, they would do the work of the advance men, all right? And then they would split the profits. But the Mills Brothers, they, and again, they were an Ohio circus. I think 1 year they wintered here in Massillon. I'm not sure. I know there were a couple that did wintered here. Okay. Clyde Beatty, some of you may remember the Ohio. Well, he was from Bainbridge, a little community just outside of Chillicothe. Okay, lion tamer, Clyde Beatty. Okay. Here is, I consider him the original greatest showman because when he partnered, Barnum was a museum owner, okay? Barnum really was not a circus man. Bailey was the circus entrepreneur. And what Bailey did, he ended up as John Forepaugh passed away, the Sells brothers started to pass away, he bought their circuses. And so he was operating the Forepaugh Sells circus in addition to his James A. Bailey circus. Now, here we have Jeremiah McGavin, who, he was just a newspaper man from Indiana. Now, what does that have to do with it? He started the American Circus Corporation, and with that, he built a consortium of various circuses. He bought the Sells Floto Circus, for instance. There was, I think, a son who let them loan the name Sells. Sells was a big draw. Late 1900s, early up until about World War II, Sells was a big draw as a circus name, just as much as Ringling. Okay. But anyway, he built up the American Circus Corporation, and then shortly before his death, he sold everything To John Nicholas Ringling, who made the purchase, September 1929. Exactly, September 1929. Top dollar. Okay. And as we know what happened in October 1929, I'm so glad, there's a certain generation, 2 generations around that would not comprehend that. But needless to say, that's when things sort of went down, and it ended up his nephew, John Ringling North, had to take over things after his death because they were, through the Depression, it hurt the business considerably. But in doing this, he was able to acquire, because the American Circus Corporation had acquired Baby Circus. And then along with that went the sales name, the forepaw name, and the like. And so the greatest show on earth as we knew it in the 20th century is made up of Sells, Forepaw, Robinson, etc. And if you go to their museum in Sarasota, outside of their museum, you will they have it in limestone, they have Sells, Forepaw, they have all the different names of the circuses that they acquired that made them the greatest show on earth.